Good. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay in getting started on our end. Just want to make sure that anyone else on the line, if they can please mute themselves while we get the introduction going. Trenton, would you like to start us off with the video from your end, or I can just start with the introductions?
Go for it.
Good. I'm going to just get started. So let's get right into it. Today we're going to discuss large-scale growing. For me, I'm extremely passionate about large-scale extraction. So really excited to have this session with our esteemed guests. And today's session sponsor is from Atami, who's very prolific in the cannabis substrate markets. And we also have to give a special shout out to our headline sponsors from Druid's Garden and Grow One Africa. Thank you so much for the support and to everyone else that has supported the event. Before I bring our panelists onto this, I just want to check if anyone is unnecessarily muted, because I'm hearing some noise on the line. If you could just check that. But let's bring into our session our esteemed guests, which is Nati, Kian, Cornell, and Daniel. If you could please join us. And I'd like you to please switch on your cameras. And I think let's start perhaps with Cornell, if you're in the room as well, then we have you on camera. But let's have perhaps Cornell start with the introductions, followed by Ian, then Nati, and then Daniel. So if you guys give us a quick introduction in terms of your experience and why you were selected to join us on large-scale commercial growing, because you're all esteemed in this.
Thanks, Jeff. Welcome, everybody. Hi to the whole panel, and thanks to all the attendees, and shout out to Chiba and the whole crew as well for putting this together. It's going to be a great day. Yes, myself, Cornel van der Walt, aka the White Lion. I'm well versed and deeply entrenched in the cannabis value chain, the complete cannabis value chain, and I got a proven track record. 28 years in the business, set up 5 large-scale industrial grows in Southern Africa, and currently involved in 28 different sites that I'm actually getting into production. So yeah, I think that's why I'm on the panel. I'm not yet to jump on a bandwagon. I've been pulling this also while.
Awesome, perfect. Kian, if you could jump in next. Kian, I think you're still on mute there, just for highlight. Okay, Kian, I'm just going to let you know I'm not hearing audio on that side. I think for now, Nati, if you want to come in, and then Kian, we're going to try to bring you back into the room with audio.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'm Nati Ferreira. I am a partner in Q Laboratories. So we've sort of a glimpse into what's happening in the market at the moment from the analytical side. And then I'm also passionate about the food industry and cannabis as a food. And if we really think large-scale growing, it is when cannabis as a food and superfood really comes online that we'll see the scale of growing that we really need. So that is my interest in this panel discussion, yes.
Awesome, Nati. Thank you so much. And while we wait for Kian, Daniel, could you give us a bit of a background on yourself as well?
Oh, thank you. My name is Daniel, aka Nongo. I've been involved in the cannabis industry for quite a while, since 2002 at the World Summit on Sustainable Development. My passion has always been on the industrial application of cannabis and the food side of cannabis. So my role as the CDCSA for Northwest Province, we're trying to influence government to really get into the cannabis industry, especially on the rural development side. So far we've done some good strides in negotiating with our government, our local and provincial government.
Excellent, perfect. Well, big strides is needed. We've all been waiting, we've all been eagerly anticipating, all the results to actually coming to a commercial model that can be supported to ensure consumer quality. At the end of the day, we need consumer products, not just medical products that are for export. So I think let's get into large-scale growing. I'm quite passionate about the subject of fast-moving consumer goods, or what we call your more recreational market products and edibles. But at the moment, we're a bit, let's call it limited in terms of what we can do in the market. I see Kian has just joined. Kian, can you let me know if your audio is up live?
Hi, Jeff, can you hear me there?
Perfect, I've got you. Please, can you give us a quick introduction?
Thank you, Jeff. My name is Kian McClelland. I'm from Druids Garden. We come from a space of holistic medicine or complementary medicines. We've been growing and manufacturing traditional medicines from Asia and Africa for many years. We recently, 2.5 years, officially went into the cannabis space, although all of our partners have been involved in cannabis probably most of our lives. And so it's been an interesting journey those 2.5 years. Doing a hemp research permit for CBD, R&D permits, where we've been a partnership with the African Cultural Heritage Trust to develop combinations of medicine using traditional African medicines and CBD and various cannabinoids. And we have just recently been granted the letter from SAPRA to have our Section 22 license, which we're hoping to receive early next week. And
Excellent.
thank you to Chiba for this opportunity and the panelists that we are with today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ken. Glad you could join there. So I'll lead with this. When you say the Section 22C, let's unbutton that. I assume that's a 22C 1B. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
That's correct. So I think this is a good breach into large-scale growing. I know that a lot of you would have had some familiarity with the platforms available to commercial growers. Namely the hemp research permits, or those 22A 9AI permits, which obviously we know is no longer being issued from SAPRA and is supposed to have been handed over to agriculture to issue and formalize the issuance of hemp permits. Other than that, it seems like the only route to commercial cannabis growing for medical export at the moment is the 22C. Is that correct? And what is your views on that current situation?
That is correct from what I understand, although we were able to export a crop sort of just after the middle of the year last year to a research institution in the States. So on those R&D permits, you can export, provided that it is to a verifiable research institution. But otherwise, yes, it's only the Section 22 licenses currently, which are fraught with issues, and there's a lot of conflicting views in the industry on whether we should be pushing for that, accepting them or not. However, that currently is the only legal route to commercial growing.
Perfect. And to anyone else on the panel, because Keon, you would know as well, but any news on any renewals of those hemp research permits that were valid for a year? Is that just in limbo across the board?
Yeah, well, so far there's no news in terms of the renewals, but my understanding is that they've been moved to the Department of Agriculture. So that's as far as I know, the move to agriculture.
Okay, good. Let me jump the topic a little because we're talking about South Africa, and I know that Cornell, perhaps you can come in here from some experience you've had in Lesotho. So Lesotho was ahead of the permitting. There were some issues about, if we were talking about a regulated export market, maybe not as stringently regulated as maybe SAPRA would have. But could you maybe give us your views on how you saw the market in Lesotho and perhaps how it compares with commercial growing in South Africa?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so experience in quite a few southern parts of Africa and also international on how the regulations move forward. And for me, it's a circular formulation. As you can see, how the market starts. It's first movers in the industry, overinflated market, burst specifically on the medical aspect of it, and then the market stabilizing in a 3 to 5 year period. It's what happened in California when I was there. It happened in Canada when I was there. It happened in Colorado when I was there. It happened in Lesotho when I was there. A similar thing would happen here in South Africa. So I think we at that beginning stages in the industry where the first movers are all out, and there's been a lot of dues paid to get going. And yes, third world countries like Lesotho and Zimbabwe and Malawi and so forth, I think are much harder to enter the export market for medicine just because of regulation, also ability. Pharmaceutical frame networks, medical control councils, and health regulations have been set up. Testing, like Jeff, there's a barrier to entry. CapEx is intensive in testing and on setting up controlled environments for proper quality assured medicine. So yeah, on the regulations, we're far behind. A lot of work needs to be done. But yes, export has happened out of Lesotho, export has happened out of South Africa. The INCBN has allocated quotas as far as I know, and the doors have been opened. It's now to just streamline it through those doors. Sorry, Jeff, I think you're still on mute there. I can't hear you.
Perfect, there we go. I was going to ask about the INCB limits because this is something I've asked SAPRO as well. It's a bit of an issue. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, the INCB is the International Narcotics Control Board. And how that works, just for our audience at large, we're not going to focus too much on pharmaceutical. I think we need to shift from that topic alone. But just to let you know, that is a situation where there's a controlled limit on THC to be exported in and out of countries. And usually there has to be a quota. So any medical regulator within a country would say, okay, what do we forecast in terms of domestic production and import? And then we put a number forward. And from that number, we end up with a situation where you can export or import that. Cornell, how has it been in terms of, have we met any INCB limits? Do we know what the INCB limits are? Have you heard anything in that regard?
Jeff, on that point, I'm speaking out of personal experience here. I'm not going to put my neck out and get chopped off and saying that the quotas are X amount or so forth. I know there's people on the panel that has got their own views and opinions on it, but for me, it's a allocation that opens the doors, and it's quite an easy amendment, as I understand, to get the quota lifted to a higher volume. It's for scheduled drugs. That's what the INCBN is about, and it's like Australia being a cocaine exporter for the dentist industry. You know, to make an example of it, you get a quota. Is it 50 kilos? Is it 500 kilos? And is it for a pharmaceutical drug that's alleviate depression? And this year maybe we have elections and we've reached that quota really quickly, and we ask for amendment, and it gets scaled up to a larger export volume. So I don't think it's a governing body that really enforces and police it, that comes around and checks on it or anything like that. I really think it's just a quota that gets placed on the country.
Perfect, 100%. Well, I hope with the UN rescheduling that will ultimately fall away, and that we'll be able to move the plant with less restrictive controls and dated policies. Nati, I'm glad you're back online. We did mention testing briefly, and you're quite passionate about the edible market space. In your opinion, to get to these processed products, what do you see needs to happen in terms of commercial growing, which we're talking about today, and the interaction between commercial growing and processing facilities?
Well, Jeff, I think first of all we need to distinguish between. Pardon?
Sorry, I've just checked if anyone is. Can you just mute any other speakers in the room while Nati's busy?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think we need to distinguish between cannabis or hemp as food, and then what we see as the edible market. When we look at the edible market, I mean, the key there would be calibrated inputs. I mean, we can't have home enterprises and chefs in restaurants cook up from cannabis oil that they got from a guy that knows some guy. We need to provide the public with a safe way to access edibles. And then on the other hand, cannabis as a food, where we're going to look at hemp, the hemp industry, cannabis as fresh leaves, cannabis as juice, the hemp seed industry, and then all the other products that come from that, where we've got a completely different type of testing. And there, the Department of Health's role is really to play only in food safety, and that's a completely different industry. When we move to the cannabinoid space and what we see as edibles, we need safe cannabinoids at calibrated levels that we can trust if we're going to start to really at a large scale provide edibles into a market, which is really a medical space still. I mean, we talk about medibles because all cannabis consumption is medicinal, and it can become dangerous. And also, there's also all sort of other nasties that we need to know whether you consume it orally or by atomizing it or smoking it.
Thank you, Nati. And I think this also comes in, if we look at the US and we look at Canada, which are quite mature in terms of what they've been doing and perhaps some of the distinctions between, I'm always cautious of the medical phrase because it's in California, it's loosely used versus what we'd call scheduled pharmaceutical product, which is definitely something else in Germany. Do we need local regulators to also start to really look at GMP, good manufacturing practices, is critical to any consumer fast-moving good. But I see there's this insistence on medical or pharmaceutical grade. So completely different standards than what we would see in dietary supplements. And our dietary supplements, I know from engagements of the US that 99% of the extractors that are in that market are dietary supplement GMP, if they are GMP listed, but they will be expected to be. But here in South Africa, we look at it from a pharmaceutical, heavily intensive critical control point analysis just to be able to get to what is called a consumable CBD wellness product. What are your views on that? And maybe Kian, you in cosmetics as well, and Cornell, if you could jump in, and then we could also hear from Daniel and Nati.
Kian, you're cute.
There we go. Thank you. So it's a very interesting question to raise there, Jeff, because quality and consistency is critical. And we need to be able to build this industry, not just for the industry, but for the consumer. We need to be able to build trust in the public in order to develop this industry for everybody involved, both locally and internationally. So quality and consistency is paramount. The levels of restriction on proving that quality and consistency is questionable. So we completely disagree with having pharmaceutical standards imposed on us. But we do believe that there needs to be stringent quality control. And the complementary health medicines framework, we believe, is sufficient to do that, provided that it is properly policed. We know of so many people in this industry that are cutting corners. As someone mentioned just now, the chef who gets a matchbox from a friend or from a friend or from a friend, that's unacceptable. So we need to be able to build that trust. And the only way to build that trust with the public, to get them to become consumers, to develop the industry, is to be able to prove the ability to provide quality and consistency. And that means regular testing. It means a whole array of services that need to, ancillary services that need to plug into the cannabis industry. But we do not believe that the pharmaceutical model is the correct one.
Perfect. Cornell, do you want to jump in as well, on your view?
Sure, Kian, thanks for that. Yes, well put there. Definitely, we got to regulate the market. I'm not the guy selling out here. We need regulations in place for quality assurance, just like you say. Products need to be grown according to GAP and harvested GACP and tested for quality assurance before it goes out to the market. But I also put caution for over-regulation. We've got to be really careful on over-regulation, and I'm trying to reach out to the government and to SAPRA here that over-regulation kills the market. It kills our local market, and it's a barrier to entry for a lot of local producers. So I speak out of experience. Perfect. Again, like the Canada has definitely exploded, and it's also crashed. It's over-regulated. If you're not, 80% of the market international is recreational. That's where it is. It's not medicinal, and that's a space we got to move towards. If you're in a state or in a country where there's medicinal and recreational, and you have to go and get yourself diagnosed to get a medical card so you can buy at a dispensary in your area, and you got to upkeep it every year, a premium comes with that. That product you're buying is a premium on the shelf. And those guys to produce it as well, all the red tape and the regulations that to jump through to get it on the shelf, it comes with a premium. So you're paying a premium price, where if you walk with your ID into a recreational store and you're buying exactly the same thing for half the price, even if you're a medical patient, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the rec store. So over-regulations kills the market.
Absolutely. So I think I'll come in there. I mean, everyone I think in this room agrees on quality assurance and quality control. And this is the only way to formalize any market. The question that always keeps coming up for me is, if I look at products like tobacco and I look at products like wine, wine's a good example, because wine is a product that is to some degree regulated. Alcohol, you need permits, there's bans for it, etc. But now here's the thing, it's an agro-processing product from wine. You get grapes, you process your grapes, you process that into wine, and you ship it internationally. Enough inputs from industries, and is government more specifically getting enough input from industries like the wine and tobacco industry? And I think of tobacco more for contract growing agreements, in terms of if we're formalizing the sector, if we are having aggregators for cultivation and aggregators for processing, is enough leaning? I mean, we've got a great wine industry in South Africa. It's world class. Why is it that cannabis is so slow to do what we've done so well in wine? And I just don't understand where the gaps are. Do you guys have any views there? And maybe Nati and Daniel, you could lead us off with that.
Jeff, I want to come in as I've got some experience in the wine industry. I think your analogy is perfect, except for that one small difference that you can, well, according to government at least, become high straight off the plant from a cannabis plant, and you cannot really do it off grapes. You still have to do further processing by fermenting the grapes. So that is where that analogy falls flat a little bit, but I'm going to continue to use it. As a grape grower, I grew under GAP, and I had a few other industry bodies. And that is where I want to come in. Those industries are all self-regulated. Government plays a very small role in regulating those industries. So there were different other industry bodies and international standards that I had to comply with in my growing, depending on where my grapes, the wine eventually went to. So that is, again, industry-driven by my market, how I must grow my grapes. Then it went to the cellar. Once it got to the cellar, then a whole other series of paperwork kicked in. Because then that's going to be converted into alcohol, ethanol, which is the regulated product. Government wants their cut in excise duties on that, and it's regulated. It's not a quota system, but governments wants to know how much ethanol is produced in this country and where it's going. So that is the difference, and that is how I see this industry too. That while you're growing it, as long as you're growing it to the standards, that's the basic standards that set the lowest in industry, and then determined by your markets. That is it. But once that product gets processed, that determines the end use, and that will be regulated differently depending on where that product goes to. And that is how I see it. And that pipeline is needed before we can really scale up any part of this industry.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think the problem we sit with is there is no medical local market. There is no, outside of, let's say, a scheduled substance where there are no marketing authorizations really in place for Schedule 4 and 6. We only have the CBD wellness industry to lean on in terms of the edible and the cannabis market, and yet we are not allowed to grow in a way that allows us to apply good GMP but not be at pharmaceutical levels. So it's one of these situations where, are we going to permanently import isolate as growers? I think it's changing, and I hope it's changing. And let me jump to this direction. If you look at the last 3 months, and I know it might be a bit of a push, but what positive signs have each of you seen in the last 2-3 months, let's say in the last year and the last month before, that is positive? I would say the publishing of a cannabis master plan tender is probably not one. It should have been done long ago. But what can you take, let's say, hope from and solidarity from in terms of where you think this market will actually go? Because we're all in it for the long term.
Well, if I can just jump in quickly, I think that's more Cornell's question, but we just, what excites me is the interest from traditional farmers. All of a sudden, I think there was an article or two in the Farmers Weekly around, but all of a sudden, people start to think about this thing. And unfortunately, I think the red herring there was the CBD industry and the big that's around in CBD farming from the States and from all over. And that's gonna go. And then these farmers are gonna come online. I've seen interest from a lot of areas around the country in hemp farming, which excites me. And then on the other hand, which also I think shows where we're going, is the explosion in the training space, where people really see this, and this industry needs people that's properly skilled. And from that end, I see that feed happening, and that excites me, because ultimately we're going to need the people too if we want to scale up this game anywhere.
Perfect. Cornell, if you could jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Nati. Sure. For me, I'm the positive guy. I see opportunity everywhere. Cannabis touches the whole industry for me across the globe, the whole value chain. So it's the add-ons, it's the grow shops popping up, it's the private cannabis clubs popping up. I'm inundated with people that wants to climb into the space. I got my plate full. Like you say, after Farmers Weekly ads and so forth, it's exploded. We have big pharma, we have big tobacco, we have all the mine guys, and we have big industries, all heavily invested in the space in South Africa. And it's about the local market not being left behind and not just focusing on that big investment market. For me, I always like to picture it what industry do you see that creates jobs that we badly need in this country? We're also giving a chance for investors to make a return on investment. We're bringing foreign investment to our shores. We're exporting, so we're bringing forex to the country itself in a bad exchange rate situation at the moment. So that's all positive. And the more and the bigger we grow and the better the quality is, like Ian said, it's about large volume, constant quality product, the cheaper the prices become. And I want that price to bottom out. It's more accessible for people that needs it. It's more accessible for people that really, really needs it, the patients as well. The bigger we take it and the faster and the better. So for me, it's a very unique industry with tremendous potential, and it's not going anywhere. The green wave has hit South Africa.
Great. If I could just add, I think I definitely agree that one of the most exciting things is the training. We have there's definitely, in order to feed this growing industry, we need a lot more skilled people. So that is a major development. I think people like Chiba Africa and others that are popping up, it's really good to see. The other thing which I think is critical is that there's a lot more ownership of the full value chain that is happening. I think in the beginning, there were so many people rushing out for offtake agreements. Everybody wanted large offtake agreements, and there was a huge amount of energy gone into cultivation only. And from our perspective, that's very much a colonial model, like gold, where gold is mined through South Africans' blood, sweat, and tears. It's exported, made into products, and sold back to us at exorbitant rates. And that's kind of where the cannabis industry was going, and still is to a large extent. It's very exciting to see that more and more people are starting to own the different components within the value chain. And we need to keep that full ownership in South Africa with South Africans, so that the full value chain is proudly South African. That's not to cut out foreigners, but that's to take our own ownership and to take the terms with which we interact with those international bodies, rather than allowing those international bodies to dangle these big offtakes and relatively small amounts of investment that everybody gets stars in their eyes. People's perspectives of the industry and its ancillary services as well is broadening, and more people are getting involved in extraction equipment and bottling equipment and so many other things that help us to keep this full value chain in the hands of South Africans. So for me, that is the most exciting thing.
No, excellent. I fully agree with that. Daniel, I'm going to bring you in a moment, but to add there, it's amazing how, when you mention the offtake pursuit, how a regulator can shape a market and distract the market from what should actually be happening to really facilitate development domestically. Because simple regulatory oversight saying we need to get your license, you need an offtake agreement, you need to have a letter of intent, you need these things. Immediately, everyone's focus shifts in that direction, and the regulator basically makes the market outward facing instead of domestically orientated on how do we actually grow an organic industry, because internationally it's competitive. You got to have experience. You have to have trained personnel, like you mentioned, just to be able to enter into a competitive first world economy. You need these things, and to make everything so outward facing is very dangerous when I see it in regulation. And Daniel, the initial question, I wasn't sure if you were off or on. What do you see that's positive in the last couple months?
Well, for me, what has been positive is the mass collaboration that has been happening with the players in the game. Like, for instance, Kiva now, as they come with the training side of things, because the way we look at it, we look at it from an ecosystem kind of a setup where you have your farmers, we have your markets, you have your inputs for the farmers to be successful and do a proper farming, your genetics that can go in there, and then the consumers are going to be educated about the whole thing. But now this ecosystem also needs to be supported by R&D. It must be supported by the training and education that Kiba is taking that space. It will also be supported by government incentives, your DTIs and all that. Also must be supported by your proper regulations that can make entry easy for farmers, rural farmers, that can be part of this booming industry. So for me, it should be that holistic ecosystem, be supported by those kind of issues that I mentioned, not looking outward into that. But again, I think in terms of the hemp, things are, I think for the last 2 months, things are shaping up. We've seen now in the Eastern Cape PSC, we have Nicholas Heinemann, who's now in charge from the Department of Agriculture and the PSC. So things are looking up. Things are very looking up.
Good. I'm glad about that. Look, I'm glad you mentioned hemp, because I've got always a bee to pick here, because I always look at it and compare it with the US Farm Bill of 2018, which basically facilitated commercialization of CBD wellness products based on outdoor grown hemp. Now, there's a few things to say about cross-pollination, hemp and cannabis, and that's a webinar to itself, because there's quite a lot to talk about on that point. But my question with hemp is, and I've asked this from agriculture as well, I am assuming at this point that CBD will be excluded from the hemp side, and that's going to make it not as sexy, as I see the word was used yesterday in a webinar, but it's not going to be the sexy side of what we traditionally, or the US, see as the hemp industry. I also think it's going to make the competitiveness in the CBD market a lot more apparent. But where do you guys see the hemp, and when I say hemp licensing market going, where do you see the fibers, the dashboards in the BMWs, the hempcretes? I think of Tony in this space. Where do you see that market evolving to? And are a lot of people thinking that's going to include CBD? And what are your views? Will it? Won't it? I suppose that's a question.
Well, Jeff, I think if I can come in there, you cannot exclude CBD from the hemp market. I mean, it will be ridiculous. It will be like telling a grape farmer, listen, you can make table grapes this year, but not wine. Next year you can make wine, but you can turn your grapes into raisins, but you can't do table grapes. You cannot exclude an important part of this market. It is gonna feed the hemp industry for a while. Unfortunately, it's happening worldwide. CBD has happened, and as the price comes down, I think it will generally phase out, and people will see the other value items of that coming in. If we're talking industrial textile, I mean, they always have that little component of CBD that's available. You on the extraction side, I mean, your efficiency will have to go up significantly to make CBD a viable part of the hemp industry in 5 years' time, I see. At the moment, it is still there. But as the price comes down and as we grow more specifically, I mean, it would be ridiculous for a guy that grows hemp seed as grain to look at CBD at all. He would grow specifically for grain. I think in the same, if you look at the textile market or you want to grow for biomass for building products, you want to harvest green plants at their optimum sort of cellulose content without any real sort of deterioration. You might not even want your plants to flower. So CBD won't play a role there, but that is 5 years down the line. At the moment, that is still a big part of this industry and potentially there to fund and float those spreadsheets and get this market off and going. So it would be unfair, I think, of government to exclude CBD from the agricultural growing side to grow hemp on a large scale and then harvest that little bit of CBD from it and sell it onto whatever that market is. I mean, we'd be looking at the food market, the supplementary health market, definitely not pharma from that. But yeah, that's my feeling on it. I mean, Daniel's got maybe some more insights in that.
Yeah, so let's go to Daniel and then we'll go to Kian and Cornell. This is important. I mean, if CBD is excluded from hemp and that's the plan, then we need to address it because industry needs to start addressing and planning for what we anticipate is coming because we can't really know what's coming, but we can guess. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I think that would be very much ridiculous to exclude CBD from hemp. It's more like the same in the adult personal use, where the regulation says there's no dealing. So I mean, you're planting, you want to have access to what you smoke, but where do you get it? How the commercial aspect of it? Where is it? So, but what I think is the government is failing to actually engage the people that has got knowledge in the industry. And again, I mean, I'm just worried about our leadership, honestly. Maybe the young generation in terms of leadership is going to come right, but will be dead by then. So we need to move and push harder so that our legislators can move to the right directions. Look, for instance, I mean, CSIR and ARC, the Agricultural Marketing Council, they've done the whole work. We've got Tony Budden and Cornell and Shan, who've been in the game for quite a long time. So the answers are there. The models are there. Greenfields, what do you call it? Middle Clark and her crew in terms of, they've done so much work. Or Fields for All, so many things has been done. So it's just for us and our regulators to bring their sense proper.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Appreciate that, Daniel. Cornell, I think, Keon is in and out of the room. Cornell, your view, is agriculture going to exclude CBD? Are they not? I've got my own predictions. You go.
Naughty, you already laughing there, but yeah, you guys are not a hemp guy. I'll keep saying that. Done the R&D, have been there. It's not viable for me to grow hemp. I've done it before. I've done the extraction on that. It yields too little CBD in the flowers. It's good for fiber, but you're entering a market where you're competing with the Chinese. It's been doing it for thousands of years. It's cheaper to import at the moment fiber than it is to manufacture ourselves here. The equipment is expensive and so forth. And I think Tony would tell you very similar things that he's found in his space. So yeah, so for me, hemp is not viable. It's job creation that we want to hear, and it's large labor intensive and large capital intensive. You have to do hundreds and hundreds of hectares to make it viable. It's not. I'm not the hemp guy, so I focus on high intensive cannabis cultivation, high tech controlled environments for a recreational and a medical market. Hemp for me is scary. Don't bring it anywhere close to me or in my area, please. Cross-pollinated, watering down the genetics. I'm not keen on it. For me, it's growing cannabis and using the biomass that's left over for the hempcrete and for that market. It's full extract. It's entourage effect of all the cannabinoids. Can't just do an API of CBD out of hemp. It's not medical. Personal opinion, guys.
No, good. That's what we're here for. We're here for the opinions, and conflicting opinions is fantastic. So I think Nati, jump in before maybe Kian, you had something to say?
Jeff, I just want to remind you of the prizes, actually, just an aside.
That's what I'm about to see as well. Just
okay, right.
So I'm assuming that everyone's watching because they want to see us debate and discuss it and make predictions. But just to announce our prizes. So I don't know if it's been brought up on the screen this side, but there we go. So we got a very nice giveaway from Atami. 3 sets of 3 bags of substrate and 5 bottles of bloom plastic. So that's basically 9, that's quite a nice big set there you've got. So everyone in that set gets 3 of the substrate and 5 of the bottles. And our winners are John Cloud, Terishni Pillay, and Simon Mundy. So well done, guys. Congratulations. I know you've been sticking around for the prizes, but I hope for the discussion as well. And let me jump ahead and ask. Kian, your view on if we do hemp and we don't include CBD, where are you on it?
Okay, well, so we're not hemp for fiber. We've been doing an R&D permit hemp for CBD. We're very fortunate to get one of the first, very few, I think, that allowed that. From what I've seen, what SARP are still pushing CBD must fall under soft because it's medical, it's ingested. We have varying views on that. However, we feel it would be crazy to exclude CBD from hemp. But going back to my earlier point that if hemp, CBD is derived from hemp, it still needs to go through the correct quality control procedures, not over-regulated, but proper quality control procedures. So you don't have industrial hemp being harvested with machinery, and then that machinery that's being used to make medicine. So you have diesel tractors and all various sorts of things, and then it ends up in medicine. So as long as that is taken care of, we believe that CBD has to be a very important component of hemp.
Okay, good. I mean, we have that there. You've addressed what I was going to ask about next, which is the risks of cross-contamination, pesticides, heavy metals from, let's say, diesel additives coming into your crops, especially if CBD is with hemp. I also positively hope that government will have industrial hemp in one box and potentially outdoor CBD, nutraceutically dietary CBD wellness spacing on the other. We hope so. I'm pushing for it as well, as I'm sure you all are. There's a distinction in that space if we were to be competitive in CBD wellness and not just medical. Because we have a framework for medical that can be very competitive globally. That is true. SAPRA is very extreme, but they are a member of PICS, which is the Pharmaceutical International Cooperation Scheme. So internationally speaking, we have a very good model for medical approvals. So I'm positive about what can happen in medical. I'm very anticipatory about what will happen with CBD. But on your point you just mentioned of cross-contaminations, the risks, we're talking about large-scale growing today. How do we manage it so that, does it have to be a split permit? Does industrial hemp have to sit here on the large stalky for fiber and hempcrete side, and then the completely different kind of strain, maybe not the right word, but your smaller CBD-rich flowers, is that going to be managed in a GAP-approved way, similar to how maybe the US grows and also has approved agro-processing centers that do the testing, confirm that there's no pesticides? I've constantly asked SAPRA as well, where's South Africa's pesticide list? We've got an Oregon one, we've got a Californian one, we've got a Canadian one, but what about the pesticides that get into our market that are not common in those markets? Where's that list of pesticides? What's your views on potentially that risk to a commercial crop? And I think that's for everyone. So let's maybe start with Nati again and run through to Daniel, Kian, and Cornell. Nati, you're just on mute.
Look, the risk of cross-contamination is obviously there. And at the moment, if you go, I would suggest that we look at, first of all, protecting our traditional growing areas from hemp with quite a wide radius around it. You throw a net over it and say this area is hemp-free. It is, but it should then not just be limited to hemp. You should then also extend it to foreign seed, any other foreign seed in that area. That you also cannot import medicinal strain from Europe and plant that as a regular seed in those areas. If you look into more traditional agricultural areas, I don't think cross-contamination is going to be that much of an issue. You obviously, if you want to grow outdoor crop for CBD, that's your decision that you want to make, and you are going to deal with a seeded crop. You're going to have rogue pollen around, and if you grow a regular crop, you're going to have serious seeding. And if you don't have a product, seed as a product, that's always a problem. But if you in a normal situation where you grow industrial hemp, it's not a problem. Cross-contamination out of a hemp field, research is limited, but a male plant in a hemp field will not pollinate as far out as a single male cannabis plant standing next to the road somewhere, because most of the male pollen gets trapped in that field. That's why if you know CBD flower, it is a very sticky flower, and it traps a lot of the pollen in the field. So there is also a difference in that. But yes, it is a problem. It's something that needs to be addressed. But the regulations then needs to be based on solid research done in South African conditions, or maybe then based on the best international research, which is not really out there. So yeah, that's just my feeling on that.
Sorry, Daniel, I was on mute there.
Yeah. Well, my take on that is regulations must be right, but also in terms of taking hemp and all that from CBD from hemp, for me also that wouldn't work. But as Nati indicated, that for quality assurance, quality must be a priority. But as we develop all these regulations and all that, let us also, in the back of our mind, put the traditional growers that have been there, and how so that we don't leave anyone behind. Because if we look at the spirit of this plant, the spirit of the cannabis plant is all about sharing. It's all about inclusivity. It's all about that. So as we figure out, as we go along, let's also have a way to deal with such issues. I think it will also fall in terms of guys that are good with genetics and all that, so that they can provide the proper seeds and all that for certain area, and how to protect the the toxins and stuff like that.
Perfect. Cornell, if you can jump in.
Yeah, so I'm the pig in the fairy tale again. I'm that same guy that's going to say, please put the hemp in controlled areas and regulate it, because I do not want to water down our potential connoisseur market. I just based it on things that's happened in the past. The Dutch guys were here to breed their genetics and to breed their top flowers for a reason, because Holland issued hemp permits and hemp licenses. The same Colorado is about to completely ban hemp out of Colorado. They leading the industry is what we got to look at. For me, it's not something to take lightly. Keep hemp up north in more third world countries that can produce it and doesn't have the medical framework to enter a medical market, and let's stick to a top quality, high content, high product for South Africa. So yeah, hemp for me, please, in certain areas and preferably up north.
Thanks for that, Cornell. And Kian, you're definitely in the hemp for CBD space. So I think we all do zoning. That's important. So that's something that government should look at.
Yeah, I think contamination from any source is critical to look at. Cross-contamination is a big problem. We take it very seriously. We're well aware of the potential of our hemp contaminating other types of genetics, and so we scout every day. We use feminized seeds. We put a whole lot of procedures in place to mitigate those risks. So I think that's very important. I just want to touch then on the traditional growers, and I think that's critical in terms of a master plan taking into account helping to build the traditional growers, and particularly around the landrace strains. And now all of the strains that are being brought in and are sanctioned by SAPRA are all foreign strains. If we're talking medicine and we're talking other applications, our landrace strains are really where it's at. There's a professor from the University of the Free State who was on a CSIR panel a few months ago, who analyzed the cannabinoid profiles of different hemps and higher THC plants from around the world against the landrace strains. And without a doubt, the cannabinoid profiles and the efficacy of South African landrace strains for medicine is off the charts compared to any other international strains. So we need to protect those landrace strains. We need to protect them from contamination of imported genetics that are potentially, or some of them, only grown for recreational purposes. And we need to be able to protect those landrace strains and the people that have grown them historically in our country, going back to what many of the speakers have saying. So the government policy and the industry's policy, because the industry needs to police itself more than the government, the industry's policy should be to protect these growers and to protect those landrace strains and not contaminate them with international strains and hemp strains, but foreign strains. So yes, that cross-contamination is something to look at very carefully, and it requires everybody to be vigilant and to help protect the industry, not be selfish with what they're growing.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I fully agree. I mean, I've dealt with a few of the academics at the University of the State and elsewhere, and absolutely, we've got such a strong academic base in South Africa. I mean, we look at the identification of the new COVID strain. I mean, that's done by our molecular biologists, identified. We've got really good technologies in terms of the genetic assessment side, and to lose these variations within the indigenous, and it's been happening for decades. But just to lose that, ultimately, without consideration and caution, is important. And I'm just always profoundly, we have such great people in this country with good, solid academic input, commercial input, experience. Cornell, you were, in the space of 28 years, you were in the US across probably 44 states. We have all of this, and yet I just want to know, and I don't want to get negative on it, but why we're not able to, I feel there's an association or a unionization that is necessary that allows for access, but simultaneously understands, I know regulation is something that someone on the street might not appreciate, but when we deal with a fast-moving consumer good, you can't bottle your own water, put it on Pick n Pay's shelf, and expect them not to have quality control. And that's true for this industry, and it's going to be true in the future, especially considering what happened with vitamin E acetate in the vape pens 2 years ago in the US. Consumer standards are going to be important. Should government tax incoming CBD products and look to use that to pay for testing of local cultivators? So use that importation tax, subsidize testing, focus on domestic development. Is that what needs to happen, and which MEC or minister is going to lead this? I think that's also, where does the buck stop? Is it agriculture, justice, or medicine? Anyone who want to jump in on there? I know we've got a few minutes left.
I definitely want to jump in here if you guys don't mind. Yeah, for me, it's an easy solution. We apply what the wine industry, what the fruit industry, all the big farmers. We're agricultural. I mean, it's in our blood to farm large scale. We should put a board in place, and it's self-regulated. It's not government regulated, where it's a central processing facility. That's where GMP plays a role. It doesn't play a role, and you're never going to do a GMP product outdoors or in a greenhouse, even for that matter. It's a indoor cultivation, so GAP, GACP, bring it, even if it's a mama from the Lullies, from the Transkei or Swaziland, it doesn't matter, that brings it. Doesn't matter how they bring it, if it's on a donkey or on a wheelbarrow or on a truck or on the back of a bakkie, it gets weighed in on a weigh bench. There's a voorskot that gets paid, guaranteed minimum to the farmers. That's what they need for their bread and butter to survive. And there's a quality assurance attached to that. Is it a Cure Lab that's sitting there and doing the testing for us, and it falls in a better category? Now we're grading it. Is it a AAA grade? Is it B? Is it a C grade? This is good enough for export market. We're fetching a high value. That farmer gets an afterskot paid to him as well, because he has ticked all the boxes. And with that, have a framework of SOPs online that can educate people. The farmer's got to know, well, why am I only getting 20,000 Rand a kilo and this guy over here is getting 70,000 Rand a kilo? It comes down to the genetics. It comes down to following SOPs and putting stridges in place on pesticides and fungicides, biological warfare on the IPM problems and so forth. So for me, there is a solution, and I think central hubs for processing across the country for people to access for a minimum guaranteed price for their crop, doesn't matter what their crop is, even if it is hemp, is the way forward.
Thank you, Cornell. Anyone else want to jump in and try to use it maybe also as I'll look for some closing remarks. I know we were delayed in starting, so I hope we have an extra 5 minutes. And I assume based on the audience attendance, there's quite a lot of you still there. I've been trying to ask some questions, but let's just go with that with everyone else as well.
Yeah, I think I can agree. Cornell's hit it right on the head, that this thing's got to be industry driven. We cannot, government's not going to set up these cooperatives or whatever's needed and these central processing hubs. And we as an industry try to, I mean, there was various bodies formed and there was this associations formed, but I think we're still all operating in isolation, and it is time to just at least stand strong and get that voice together again from everybody in the industry to just and come across stronger, and not just come across as just holding government's hand, but really saying, listen, we've got the expertise in this country and the scientists to really regulate this thing well and set those regulations in place, and then also provide the channels to get it from the field up onto the local market and then out into the export market. And then quickly, yes, government should tax incoming CBD. Against protective markets around the world, but with this as a new market, we do need some protection, and we should be allowed to grow local CBD with protection on CBD imports for a while at least.
Perfect. Yeah, look at what Canada has done. Completely protectionist on the medical side, let alone some others. So, Daniel, your views?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Nati and Cornell. They just hit it on the nail. So I just want to share what we've been doing in the Northwest with government so far, which is very much promising. We've engaged. The Department of Health is very much in support, especially on the medicinal value chain of the cannabis industry. So in terms of working together, as Nati says, we really need to put our heads together so that we become much more stronger. So with this kind of partnership and relationships, I think we can be assisted in our province to do the right thing from scratch. And then secondly, with the municipalities, we are now talking in terms of they should include cannabis in their integrated development plans. So it's a very nice thing that is going on. We are very much hopeful. And with this kind of working relation and partnerships, I think that's where we can hit the nail right. And especially with what Kiba is bringing in, and with all the players that the knowledge that they are bringing onto the table, that's going to work for the industry.
Perfect. Kian?
Thanks, Jeff. I agree with the previous speakers, self-regulating industry 100%. And yes, I do disagree with taxing in general, taxing of imports, but I think that this industry does need a little bit of protection to help it grow. So yes, we would vote for that.
Okay, perfect. Now I'm glad we're in agreement. Look, for me, ultimately, why we're not associating more prolifically is a good question. I think these events facilitate that. I think it's always important for anyone watching, anyone partaking. This is how we start to associate, because our views come out, our leanings come out, and we start to realize who within our community we should perhaps join with, because ultimately everyone's correct. We need, as an industry, drive this segment, because to wait for it is unfortunately, there are the risks involved. But constantly waiting for reform is usually leads to revolution. So I think it's important that we associate. We meet each other. I see Shibas having their open day on their campus tomorrow. So anyone who can make it, it's, I think, a great event for anyone to attend. And I just need to thank our panelists, because I think the thing I've seen from engagement, and I come from a pharmaceutical background, which doesn't make me always popular, but at least I think it gives me some form of temperament regarding quality assurance. And every investor needs clarity. And the more clarity is established from better and more competent teams. And one of the things we need to almost get out of the industry is we need associations and events like this where you can actually assess the validity of what's being asked, what's being said, and who's saying it, and start to have more of these frequent engagements. COVID has made it difficult. I've often found some of these virtual or live expos in place a great event to learn who's on the level. But I think today we've had an outstanding team with us, a competent, very experienced team in the space, and I would encourage anyone who's in the chat to please engage with our team members, incorporate them if you can into your team and planning, and definitely appreciate the experience and what's been shared today, because I think it's the type of thing that moves the industry to association and to ultimately lobbying so that government can understand they should just hand it over to us and hear what industry needs to do. So, gents, I think we are possibly on the last minute of our time control. I want to thank you all again. If we can, 30 seconds by everyone. Keep it short and sweet. Your hopes or your advice to anyone out there looking at large-scale growing. Nati, I think you're on mute there.
Sorry,
if I could just come in there.
Okay, Daniel, you're there.
Go, Daniel. Daniel, you can go ahead. Quick, short synopsis.
Okay. Yeah, my last take on this one is very much appreciated. Okay, thank you. Yeah. First, I want to thank all the organizers of the event and Kiba as well, and all the players, the panelists. I hope in the few months or so we'll be seeing this kind of dialogue in the Northwest Province. I really want to make sure that we take this conversation to my province as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cornell?
Yeah, I would say the future is green. It's cannabis green. Plant, guys. Let's outplant regulations. Let's get it going. My quote is, no matter what your need for weed, even if it's greed, it all starts from seed.
I've heard you say that before. It's a nice quote. Nati?
No, I think we said what we wanted to say, but we just need to see this mass collaboration happening that we're talking about. I like what Daniel's saying. And then, like Cornell's saying, get growing. That's what it's about. And we spread this good gift that is cannabis into the world.
Perfect. And here?
Upscaling is fraught with challenges. As we've all finding out, going from growing kind of 10 or 20 bushes in your backyard to growing 20,000 and up is a significant step. So I think that teamwork, sharing of resources, sharing of knowledge is critical. We've encountered too many people who are very, very stingy with their knowledge, and we believe that the only way to build this industry is to build it on quality assurance and on the open sharing of knowledge to help us all develop this industry together. And then I just want to say thank you to the panelists and to Chiba for making this possible.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I agree. I think these events open it up and get us in the conversation, get us into some kind of planning. For anyone on the webinar, thank you for dealing with our slight delay in getting started. So thank you for staying online for another 9-10 minutes. And please be sure to join Chiba, and I know I will, at 2 p.m. for the How to Market a Cannabis Business. Thank you to my esteemed panel today. I appreciate it so much. I'm glad we got to really dig into it, keep it a real conversation, nothing pre-scripted. No one had any idea what we were going to discuss outside of the fact that it was large-scale growing. And thank you again. I'm looking forward to the next engagements and the next sessions. And thank you, Sheba, and all the sponsors that have been involved.